So you've decided to move to Australia, and that's so exciting, but it's a little bit scary not knowing how much everything's going to cost. So I thought I'd make a little video just going over some of the expenses of moving to Australia, and then also some of the monthly expenses you'll need to budget for as well. Now, if I've missed anything, please leave them in the comments section, and if you want more tips or advice for moving to Australia, don't forget to subscribe. So if you've decided that you want to live and work in Australia, you will need to get a working holiday visa that will give you the option to live and work in Australia for a full year. But that will cost you about $450 to apply. Now once that visa is approved, then you'll have to get your one-way ticket. And a one-way ticket to Sydney, depending on where you're coming from, usually runs you about $1,000. If you're going to be living in Australia for a year, chances are you'll stay short-term in a hostel and then move to an apartment. But an apartment requires a rental bond. Now that's usually 2 to 4 weeks of rent. So it's good to budget to have an extra $1,000 set aside for a rental bond. You will get this money back once you move out of your rental. So once you've settled in Australia, you'll get to pay those wonderful monthly bills that you had back home, and that means paying rent. Now rent is paid weekly, and it really depends on how much you want to spend and what you want to live in. So if you want to just share a flat, it's a little bit more expensive. If you want to just spend the bare minimum on rent, I would suggest moving into a room share. So I was spending about $300 a week renting an apartment, but you can easily find something cheaper. But to be on the safe side, I have estimated that $300 would be a safe bet for renting in Sydney, as Sydney and Melbourne are some of the world's most expensive cities. So keep that in mind, and if you do want to spend a little less and aren't hung up on living in Sydney or in Melbourne, I would suggest checking out other cities like Adelaide, Perth, Darwin, or Brisbane. Now another thing every traveler needs is a shit happens fund, or an emergency fund as the fancy people like to call it. Basically, that's just a spare $1,000 just to make sure that you're always safe and that you have everything you need in a medical emergency. Sometimes not all expenses are covered, or if you're off for a few weeks between jobs, or if you're injured and can't work, it just kind of adds that extra safety net, and I think every traveler needs it. So another monthly expense you will need to have is insurance. So anything can happen, including a medical emergency, and if you're going to be in Australia for a year, you can bank on having to visit the doctor. So definitely make sure that you get medical and travel insurance. That will run you roughly $100 a month. So you'll definitely want to keep in contact with all your friends and family back home and all the friends you meet here. So a phone plan will cost you about $30 a month. You'll also want to explore your new city, so I would suggest budgeting $100 for a transit pass. I would also budget about $180 a month for food. I think that's a pretty reasonable amount. That does give you the flexibility to cook at home or also go out a few times. So it really depends on how much or how little you want to spend on food for that budget item. I like to also have a little bit budgeted just for those random items you're going to have. You're going to have to pay for laundry, soap, shampoo, haircuts, all those things. So I usually set aside about $30 to $40 a month. So how much or how little you spend in Australia is really up to you, and I hope this budget chat was really helpful with just getting a better understanding of how much the move is going to cost you and what are some of those monthly expenses going to look like. Now, if I've missed anything, please leave them in the comment section below. And if you want more tips on living in Australia or going nomad, please subscribe.